Hi, I'm Todd Jones, host of the podcast Pressbox Access. Here's a clip from my interview with Alexander Wolff. Alex recalls his impression of Michael Jordan in college and what made him such a special player. Michael Jordan, you wrote about him throughout his career at different times, including when he was at North Carolina playing for Dean Smith. Do you remember the first time you met Jordan and what your impression was of him as a player and a person?
Yeah, I remember it vividly. It was in Carmichael Auditorium. So it's not the Dean Dome, it's the old gym where the Tar Heels played before the Dean Dome was built. And they just had a practice in there. And I think it would have been his freshman year, but Dean wouldn't let me talk to him if he hadn't already played a game. And he was just open and almost childlike, not at all the kind of assassin that we think of from The Last Dance, just a broad smile. And indeed, he had a little bit of that a couple years later when I did the first cover story of him as a Bull and followed the team on a road trip out to L.A. And we went with a photographer, Manny Milan, the same guy who took that great Moncrief cover.
Was Michael a rookie at the time?
He was a rookie, yeah. He was having a great rookie year, and we ended up putting him on the cover. And and Manny got him to go to a go-kart place, because there'd be great pictures. And there he was in a go-kart, just having a blast, not looking like a guy who was going to rule the league, but just looking like a kid with great talent who was having fun. And he had a lot of that same openness and naivete. I remember asking him for that story, what are your goals for your career? And he said he would like to win championships and this and that, and then play in at least one All-Star game. And of course, all right.
Okay.
You might want to adjust those a little bit. But, and it was the story was built around how Nike was introducing a personal shoe, and all these things seem like they're from the beginning of time when you consider all that has elapsed since then. But yeah, he was very, very open and no real sense of how competitive he was, except I would hear from other people. I would hear about how his tongue would come out when he was really bearing down and concentrating. His best friend was this guy, Buzz Peterson from Asheville, North Carolina, who I think had nosed out Michael for Mr. Basketball in the state. Mm-hmm. So, of course, that set the terms of the competition because Michael never forgave Buzz that, but Michael made Buzz his best friend. Maybe keep your enemies close, but your friends closer, or whatever the expression is.
I love all these Godfather references. This is great.
I'm sorry. I didn't know we were going in this direction here.
I love it.
But this is the business we've chosen. But, he was just a college kid. And I think it was kind of after he had an injury early in his career with the Bulls. And then it was a coaching change, and he saw just how much of a business it was. I think that combined with this innate competitiveness turned him into this kind of more monstrous personality that we've came to know and not always love, but certainly respect.
When he was a player at Carolina, did you see signs that he had an assassin-like personality in his game?
Yes. Yeah, and I always turn people to one game. It was a game in Coalfield House. Len Bias was, of course, still there.
At Maryland, right? At
Maryland, yeah. And Jordan had a really good game against a very good team. I mean, Bias was just the beginning of it. They had Ben Coleman and Adrian Branch. They were a terrific team. But there was just something about the way Jordan was commanding the court. There was just another inch of elevation that he had and confidence. And he ended up intercepting a lazy pass to the wing with about 4 or 5 minutes to go, and just got to do his whole thing. And he cuff dunked it and slammed it down. And I remember we went up to him in the locker room after the game, and somebody asked, were you trying to send a message with that dunk? And Michael just looked down at his sneakers. He was untying them, and he looked up and he said, no messages. And my story, I said like an efficient secretary. It was just, that was my first little glimpse of the Michael who would just do everything on his terms. And it wasn't until his junior year in college, the end of his junior season, that we really saw that.
I think in 2020, you were a panelist when the Center for International Studies and Diplomacy, think about that, held a virtual roundtable on Michael Jordan and basketball's global growth. I mean, we're talking about the Center for International Studies and Diplomacy is talking about Michael Jordan and the impact he had, on the game around the world. Why? What was it about Jordan that just made him so appealing to people, around the globe?
Well, I know in China there was a particular cultural response. So young Chinese people who like basketball are not impressed by the Chinese National League. They think it's inferior product. So as long as they could watch NBA games, and except for when Daryl Morey would put his foot in his mouth, they generally could, they would always want to watch NBA games. And Jordan very quickly, I think partly because the color red, which he wore with the Bulls, is considered auspicious in Chinese culture. It's the color of the dynasty, obviously the flag of the country. Partly because of his whole imperious attitude, he sort of imposes his will on the competition. It's a combination of talent and hard work, evident hard work. He's not seen as a slacker in any way. And unlike, say, Allen Iverson, whom a lot of Chinese people think would break the rules by palming the ball every time he dribbled it.
But that was only in practice.
Yeah, that was only in practice. But Michael was seen as sort of ticking every box. So he was beloved in China, which gets you, that's like 20% of the world right there. But even beyond that, I think there was a book called Michael Jordan and the New Global Capitalism that came out. And the fact that Michael generated so much endorsement interest, that he was had the GDP of a small nation, I think captured a lot of interest and curiosity around the globe.